Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Career Trailblazing on Purpose podcast. I am excited today to have David Berz on the show with us. I have worked with David over my career and known you for years now, and just have always found it fascinating how you have taken the technology side of learning. I live in the more on the people side. So listening to you talk, I always feel smarter and then not as smart at the same time, but safe to be that because I just learned so much from hearing things out. But recently we got to catch up, and I was hearing just a little bit of probably something that I didn't even know about how you've navigated in your career and all the cool things that you've done from that learning technology. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. But would you mind just sharing a little bit? I've seen you make some really smart moves going from different companies to different companies, and the knowledge and experience that you've picked up along the way. But what has been the philosophy? Has there been one around how you've moved in your career?
It's not as much maybe a philosophy as a passion.
Mm.
So, all throughout my life, I have had this passion for technology. As a young person growing up in the Bay Area, I had access to a place called the Lawrence Hall of Science. It's still there. I don't know what kind of classes they have now, but this is back before we had computers as we know them today. But they had these computer classes that were just amazing and really launched or created the appetite that I have for technology. Fast forward to my career. I started off in a very technology focused role, working on even a help desk at one point in my life, all the way to, as careers do, just meandering into learning and development. And at some point, there was this convergence between the two. Just knowing that I love technology and I like the idea of how we can connect technology to increase or create performance opportunities or make performance better. That may have come from selfishly a little bit of like early on in my career, seeing, I don't want to criticize anybody, but what wasn't working for me in learning and development, right? So, I mean, not necessarily bad learning, but just learning that didn't work for me. And I just thought there's got to be better ways.
I don't necessarily come to it. I'm not afraid of the technology, but I don't enter into through the door that way. And because I've been able to work with people like you that are able to show technology at this kind of where you said like you have a passion for it. So you see things that I think I would be kept at a rudimentary level of how it's leveraged in learning if I wasn't around people like you who really saw it as this kind of main stage player in what in strategy.
So technology has always played a big part in my life in that not only am I passionate about it, but just probably very selfishly, it's helped me be able to learn, be able to do things better. It's everything from like, I'll never forget, one of the first jobs I had, my boss as a gift gave me a Palm Pilot. But this is back when Palm Pilots, they didn't connect to there was no internet. They didn't connect to anything. So everything, like I had a calendar on my computer and I also then had to manually transfer and I always thought to myself, man, someday they're going to connect these two things. And so then when they finally did, it was like, oh, I got to have that because now I got my calendar in my hand. I'll never forget to go to a meeting and it's the same calendar. It's on my computer. And so like just as technology has increased, it's helped me become a better and better person, both personally and professionally. And so that has been sort of the impetus for guiding and directing my interests professionally and the things that I do.
Well, this leads me to another reason why selfishly I wanted to be able to have a discussion with you because I want to pick your brain a little bit as the topic du jour is AI, but I feel like a lot of times all I'm hearing is the hell and brimstone kind of the bad things that are coming and how your job's going to get sucked away. And I know that there's also this other lens of, but how is it going to help us? And I don't want to turn away from the things that we need to be thoughtful of and cautious of, but I also don't want to ignore this side of like, well, yeah, but let's embrace how technology can help us and at least spend some time exploring that. So that's what I appreciate you taking the time out today. I want to chat with you about. So I was reading your newsletter and I loved the call out of generations, and I get that everybody's different and they're all engaging it. And even I was seeing myself differently in some of those, but I did like the breakdown of how different generations might be engaging with AI. And so elaborate on that.
I think what's interesting is that you have, as I was saying in the newsletter, so you have people our age or older, because we're not that old, right? No, we have people that are, the older and more mature workforce, but it's the technology that we grew up with, right? And so we didn't have search engines, and when they came around, they were gold to us. It was something that we had never had access to. I remember, I won't speak for you, but I remember my last year of university having Google, but my first year of university was sitting in the library before finals, searching through the microfiche, looking for journals and articles to support my hypothesis and theories, right? And so, but that experience shapes how we see technology and where we see technology, right? You've got that middle layer, and these are people that have had, or folks that have had this technology or technology, not AI technology, but just technology, right? That it's a little bit more modern, ubiquitous to their lives and their experiences. And the way that they've started to use AI is in support of giving advice or really being able to, seek a way or a menu of doing things. And so what I mean by that is, you'll see people using AI to develop a workout plan, for instance, or to develop, a weight loss plan or a diet or a nutrition plan or things like that as an advisor. And then the last one is folks that are just coming into the workforce or not even in the workforce yet, but these are, people that have grown up with an iPhone in their hands, and they've really had it their whole lives. And suddenly AI is here and they're young enough that, yeah, of course. Just like I think, when, search engines came about, I think we probably, I'm trying to remember, it was a long time ago, but, we probably felt like, oh, of course, like, why wouldn't, because it sort of matched it matched how we searched the microfiche. It matched how we would go and do research. We would look, you had to know a topic, you had to know how to find something on a microfiche. With a Google search, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to be able to ask it the right questions. It finds it. You sort through it. You pick out what's good. You use what's good. Enter the cell phone or the handheld computer, and where you're able to schedule things, do things. Everything's at your fingertips. It just makes sense that suddenly, and also it can then act as an operating system and start to design your life for you, or the things and tasks that you're trying to do within your life. So if you think about like how we as generationally look at things with those filters, I think it makes a lot of sense.
It's just, to me, when you break it down like that, to me, one, I guess my brain goes to this thing of, yes, I've been using it as a search function, and you're right, that's probably the way that I entered into it, because I do remember I remember being in the workplace and being really good at being that, using the internet. And I remember an older employee coming to me and saying, "You're so good at this, like, how do I get good at this?" And at the time, I think I was just a jackwagon 20 something of like, "What do you mean you don't get this?" But to me, it was instinctual. And it was a little hard for me to break down how to do this, because to your point, I'm trying to teach her a whole way of thinking, and I didn't know any different. So it's how do I teach you something that I've just been embedded with for years? And so when you start to talk about it as an operating system, my brain is flexing to get there. I trust that it will. But you're right, there's a whole generation that this is just makes perfect sense. Like, this is just intuitive.
I think that's the struggle, right? And so the first part, asking what we'll call a more perfect question, right? So there's good questions to asking AI, and then there's bad questions, right? Like, so just asking it is it like this or is it like that, like a Google search? It's not bad per se, but you're not going to yield the most useful results necessarily.
Yeah.
Whereas, we've all seen that there's a formula in which you should be following when you're asking a question. But what you and I were starting to talk about earlier is, and then it goes beyond that. And beyond that is, how do you then automate things? How do you then use it to just um, engage and do something on your behalf? The agentic part of AI, right? So it's the asking it a more perfect question and then having it do something with that. And that's the operating system part that we're talking about. It's like it just becomes ubiquitous to your life and the work that you do. You and I talked about this months ago, actually, in your webinar, Heather, in where people are concerned about how AI is going to be in the world, how AI is going to influence their jobs or change their jobs or perhaps take away their jobs. And it's not just, man, this is, we read this daily and things like that. And I think, unfortunately, yeah, I think it is going to change jobs, is going to um, change the way that we work. But this shouldn't be something scary necessarily, right?
I'm going to go back to that individual that I'm thinking of that was like, "Oh, you're good at this. How do you do this?" To be honest, part of the reason I was a little flippant about the like, like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm just so good at this," is she was someone who was kind of this like master of information. She had this lockbox of expertise, and when I showed up, I was like, well, half the stuff I don't need you for. I can just search on the internet and I'm going to get that information. So you're no longer the presider of control. And I can look back now and I think that some of the reason I was a little bit, put off is like, well, I could see she was kind of clutching harder because it was like, well, if I'm not the master of all this information, what's my stake in the game? Where's my place in this role? And I was kind of coming in and going like, yeah, you shouldn't be whatever. But now I have this empathy for her of like, yeah, she probably was feeling the way that she had kind of competitive value was getting stripped away. And I think I'm seeing people, look at the AI situation and go like, well, where do I fit in this? And I agree with you. I don't think people are going to fit the same way that they did. That doesn't mean that there's not a place for them, but we've got to be open to what does it look like now. And I think the ones that are going to thrive the most with this are the ones that are going to go, how do I leverage this? And the agentic way that you're talking about, that I think is a skill set and all on its own, but also be open to there's other things that it's going to unleash that I can do. If she had just been more open of like, okay, this way of working is changing. Now, what do I bring and how do I leverage this to show up in a different way?
I think back a lot, or I was starting to reflect on this as I was thinking about what we're talking about right now. If you think back to like the different revolutions throughout our economic revolutions, I mean,
Yeah.
and go all the way back to the agricultural revolution, to the industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution, where you went from people that were working in the fields or working in agriculture by hand, or even with manual tools, to things that were suddenly able to do all of that work for them. And at first blush, it may appear as though all of those jobs are just gone,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not an expert in agriculture versus industrial, but just perceptionally, where my mind goes is, yeah. So it went from manual to machine, and once we got to the machine, that was a whole new skill set. So people had to learn to use the machine. Yeah, there's less people in the fields, but there's more people that are needed elsewhere, right? There's people that are needed to maintain the machines now. There are people that maybe needed to, once all of this bulk, because by the way, it can get a lot more of whatever that produce or whatever it is all at once. Who sorts it? Who then, gets it into the next machine or whatever at that time, anyways, right? And so I think the point that I'm getting at is there were different jobs. It created different jobs. And I don't know that AI is necessarily going to take all the jobs, but I don't think it will. I think it's going to take the way that we did jobs away from us, just as, machines took manual agricultural away from our, I don't want to say ancestors, but
Yes.
previous,
I know.
work.
There's going to be some people that are hurt by the word ancestor. Like, I'm still here. I'm
Yeah.
still here. I'm not an ancestor. But I think the thing is, and look, mass production of food has its problems, right? And we're seeing those problems in our food system. So I think it's fair to go. I don't think everything about AI is just fantastic and that we don't have to have some caution about it. But I do think that there's a certain level of like, we're indexing on what could be wrong with this. Okay. But are we doing any indexing on what could be great about this and how could it be great for me? And at least asking that question of like, how could this be great for me? What would it unleash in me? So I'm not the expert in this, and I feel like you're much more familiar in this area. So, we already talked about this idea of, okay, I'm using it for searching the way that I'm used to searching for information or answers on Google. And then, advice, like, let me get advice. I know that I use the internet for advice as well. And I feel like the skill of going to the internet for advice, you referenced it a little earlier, but this ability to sort through what's good advice, what's not good advice is it's not just that I find advice, is that I also have to go, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's great. And I think with AI as well, is as you're searching for stuff and getting information, it's just pulling. So it's not necessarily at a point where it goes, this is, oh, I've vetted it completely for the right things. Depending on what you asked it to bring, you still got to go sort through it. When you go to the agentic side of it, if I'm just coming into this going, I want to be open to leveraging it. And I'm honestly selfishly asking for myself because I've not figured this out and I've just barely veered into this. What are the things that people should start doing that are not organically primed to think this way about really getting the most out of agentic AI?
So, well, first, let me kind of respond to what you're saying about the skill set, and the skill set that you were describing, by the way, I think is critical thinking. So I
Yeah.
had this really interesting conversation with a school teacher a couple weeks ago, and he said to me, man, I am so frustrated with kids these days using AI to create their papers or to do their homework assignments. He said it's really obvious and they're missing out on the opportunity to think through this, which is going to impact them and affect them later on. And I thought about it, and my response was, but what if we tackle that from a different perspective, right? Like I can tell you, and by the way, I think workplace needs to think about this too, right? Don't use AI, right? We're going to have a no AI policy. Schools are going to say, can't use AI, don't bring it into the class.
Mm.
They're still going to do it. Chat GPT is easy to access. It's free in a lot of, places. Gemini, free. And so maybe the better strategy for this is to say, we're not going to tell you not to use it, but we're going to help you, again, form that perfect question and then critically think through it. So a really good example of what you were just talking about is there's a high profile legal case that's going on right now in where this person had a group of lawyers, attorneys that had used ChatGPT or, I don't know which one, but used an AI, LLM, to help them write their case briefing. And you've heard of AI hallucinations. It actually hallucinated some of the case law, right? So attorneys use case law to support a premise or an idea. And so it had hallucinated and made up these cases that didn't exist.
Okay.
Well, these unfortunate attorneys did not go back and review that. They didn't look at it. They didn't check the work. They didn't. And so when it got to court and, the other side, I'm assuming, looked at it and said, Your Honor, these are untrue cases. This is, bull.
Oh,
Those attorneys are actually facing potential disciplinary. I haven't actually heard an update to this. It may already happen, but are facing potential disciplinary actions, including, their being removed from the bar, losing their bar
yeah.
accreditation. So, so when we think about that, what's the critical skill here? AI is going to get better and better and better for sure, but it still is going to get things wrong. If I have AI look at my skill set, and I say my background, me personally, my background is in AI and learning, it will constantly think that I'm talking about machine learning and not human performance. So it's still like there, it's, I think there's always going to be these kind of issues. So number one, the skill set that people are going to have to adapt to, and I think that's going to be really important in an AI centric world, is critical thinking.
First of all, I love the call out on this because okay, okay, I'm gonna share a little story that's connected to this. I remember this was years ago, and I was getting in a conversation with one of my coworkers, and I was complaining about like, oh, this generation is so caught up on technology. We're going to lunch, and I had left my car to get work done. I had a loaner car. So we get in the car and I'm complaining about how codependent people are or overdependent on technology. Codependent is probably not the right word. Overdependent. And I'm complaining and bitching about it. And I put the car in reverse and I'm looking at the backup camera and I'm complaining about this and dink, I hit the wall behind me. You know why? It's not a backup camera. It was a screen in the same place that my backup camera is, but it was just the radio. Like it didn't have a backup camera, but I'd been so trained, over dependent on technology that I didn't look behind me. I just relied on a backup camera that, by the way, doesn't exist. So I basically, that conversation, I shut up because, okay, I'm being trained. I'm no different. But I think there's this, to your point, there's this balance of, yes, the technology is there. We saw the same thing with the internet. Yes, now you have this access to all this information. You know, I'm not sitting here and judging the lawyers that didn't double check the facts and whatnot, because I feel like there's a level of, if you delegate that to a paralegal, you're supposed to, you know, double check your work. I know that I use ChatGPT a lot, where I'll put a document that I designed through and say, check this for typos and errors, because this has been the bane of my existence my whole professional life, is that I'll miss typos, and somehow, you know, now that's the fall. Oh, you can't believe you have a typo on this document. But what I've also caught is it will call out, and I don't know if there's a name for this. I've been calling them ghost typos, of like, there's periods on some of these sentences and periods on some of them that aren't there, like these bullet points. And I'm like, I look and I'm like, no, there's no periods. I cleaned them out. They used to have periods and I cleaned them out. So I'm like, are you tapping into a previous version of this document that I don't know about? But I'm double checking and I'm like, it doesn't exist. So I know that I can't also just go, oh, 100% this is taken care of now. But just like if I delegated that to a human to proof it, just because they're good at proofing doesn't mean that I can trust all the time that they're still human. So I think the critical thinking, I think the accountability piece of, if this still is your responsibility, you still have to have the oversight, whether a human did it, another human, or AI did it. It's a bit of a team member, and so you still have to have that accountability of, are you cross-checking for that team member?
That is such a good way to look at it. By the way, I do all my best proofreading after I hit send. And you know, and a funny story that I heard the other day, that gets to your point right there, is somebody told me, I was reviewing a candidate's resume today, and I got to the very bottom and it said, tell me if this resume matches the job description, and where are my gaps?
Yeah.
It was a chat prompt.
Sure.
So that was not a typo. It was, you know what I mean? And he probably just didn't, he or she, I don't know who the person was, but that person just copied it and pasted it from the chat, you know, window that they, and into. So to your point, like there's still a lot that goes into using our AI.
But
Now,
I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
please, go ahead.
I'd almost say like, but also that thought process of, instead of like, even that, and this is maybe my bone of contention when it comes to people and typos and like you. So the prompt was there, they copied and pasted it, but I'm like, okay, but that also shows me that this candidate is using the technology that's out there, took the time to go, you know, where the gaps are. It's what we want people to do. And so I don't know what the recruiter did with that resume, but I don't, okay, so they forgot to delete all of us are doing it. That typo, because that's what I would consider a typo, isn't a reason to pass up on somebody. I think it's actually a reason to go like, okay, but they're doing all the things that we want them to do. That's just my little side note.
Perhaps. I agree that I agree we want people to be using it and using it the right way. And I think it goes to our earlier, you know, conversation about my school teacher friend who, you know, what should we be teaching kids in school? And instead of telling them don't do this, right? It's like telling them not to use an iPhone, right? Like they're going to do it no matter what. But the critical skill there was attention to detail, you know.
I this is where and this is probably this is my pet peeve through my career because people say like, "Oh, you don't have attention to detail." I'm like, "I do have attention to detail." Here's the thing is I will notice, and maybe this goes to neurodivergency a little bit. There's
Mhm.
this assumption that I just looked at it and I didn't give it a thought.
Yeah.
My attention to detail shows up where I can see the micro nonverbal expressions of somebody. I remember micro points of conversations and can track the pattern. If you tell me to look at a document and to proof it, I'll look at it, I'll read it backwards, I'll do all the things that people are saying that I should do, and probably spend more time on it than most. I'll still miss some of those things. My brain's not wired to catch it. And so that's probably where I get we're going on a sidetrack because of my compassion and like the fight for the cause of this individual of like that's exactly something that I might do, but I didn't do anything wrong, and yet I may have proofed it and I just missed that thing. So anyways, we can do a separate discussion on attention to detail and what it should truly mean.
Yeah.
Anyways, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Do you remember your train of thought, or did I throw you off?
Um, Look, I don't disagree with you. I think that the skill set that this candidate was using and applying the technology is to your point exactly what we probably want. It's job dependent, of course. If he or she was applying for a job as a copywriter,
Yeah.
then maybe that would be a problem. And I think so. The bottom line is, and where we were going with this is like it is important. I think for us to think through what are the skills, and this is how we started, that are going to be most important in an AI world.
Yeah.
And I think you know clearly we can't leave everything to AI, at least not at this point, right? Again, I think things are going to get better and better, and things are going to shift, and we'll have to shift. Which, by the way, in my opinion, that's another skill set that's going to be really important in the AI world is adaptability.
Yeah.
Being able to, go from that mindset and where this is a glorified or supercharged. I like that better. A supercharged search engine to like this is an operating system that I can enable. Um, I mean, that's going to be really important, and really understanding the limitations and possibilities that are in AI is going to be really important. And being able to be adaptable with that is one of the things that I think people are going to a skill that's going to be very, very important. You'll find the jobs and the things that'll sort of emerge from
I
that.
agree with you. There's going to be jobs that are coming out of this, but this operating agentic way of thinking, what are, so I'm starting from I'm comfortable with the using it for advice in a search engine, supercharged search engine. What are some of the basic things someone could start doing around the really thinking about it as this operating system and start engaging with it that way?
So in recent days, and by the way, this is like at the time of our discussion on this stuff's hot off the press. So this
Yeah.
is like, I don't mean that in the sense that like I'm giving you some great news. I mean that things are changing so fast that by the time somebody watches this in a year from now, it may be. However, the various the biggest chat consumer products, right? The LM consumer products. The biggest ones are right now Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, and ChatGPT. And actually, I put Perplexity at the end of that, and Gemini probably in the beginning of that, in order of like where they are in terms of like great features. Changes every day, like I said, right?
Yeah.
Gemini just happened to do some big releases last week that made them kind of on the top. ChatGPT has now released a new meeting note thing that's going to we're using Zoom. Zoom has the same thing, AI meeting notes. It's going to probably cut into that market. But where I was going with this is Claude and ChatGPT. Gemini might. I'm not really sure, but they have some amazing connectivity to other systems out there. So I'm very familiar with the Claude ones. I'll talk about that. But Claude just released this, I think, last week. Yeah, I think it was just last week. This is June 11th, 2025. So it was
Yeah,
the first
I
week of
stamped
June.
this.
Yeah, first week of
It'll be
June.
a week from now, and they're like, "That was so passe."
Anyway, but anyways, they released this connectivity tool, and the connectivity tool basically can connect to like HubSpot and various things like that. So when you ask that question, what should I be thinking? So number one, you should be thinking about where can I get the connectivity to some of the other sources that I have. Plot can connect to Google Drive. It can search your Google Drive. Gemini obviously can as well. And so how can I think about the power behind being able to go through something like HubSpot, your CRM, and your own documentation, and being able to help you develop a premise, an idea, or a presentation.
Mm.
There's a lot of power in that. So that's number one. Um, the second thing I think in thinking about using agentic AI is there's a time when you want it to connect to all of those things, and there's a time when you don't. And so what I mean by that is sometimes you need to do research or work within your own stuff that is not connected to the internet, is not connected to external sources. And so there are features that you can do, but a really good way to do this is Google has their Google Lab, which allows you just to put documents in and then to search through just those documents. So anyway, so without using examples, because again, these change so fast, but the connecting to external sources, being able to connect those, and then connect and not connecting, knowing the difference of when you should use those. That's number one. Number two, there is a ton of resources now that can create things like pictures and diagrams and things like that. So connecting to some of those sources, being able to develop your premise, being able to develop like whatever it is you're writing or doing, your work product, and connecting that directly to something that'll create images or create slide presentations for you, create diagrams, things like that. That's a whole step you don't have to do anymore. We were talking about, so I'll let you jump in. Let me just finish the last thought here.
Yeah.
We were talking about, and this might be one of those things that's going to kind of go away, but people that are people that are doing that creative side, recreating those images, creating slide presentations, creating all, having an assistant, basically, I guess is what I'm saying. That might be gone because you can literally do that in real time while you're doing your work product. It's creating the items next to you.
Mm.
Very easy to connect those things. So that's the first part of and a great way to get started on that.
Tracking. So when you said the connection piece, it never dawned on me this idea of, being intentional about whether or not it's connecting internally versus externally to information and whether that's the combo. And then the idea, my brain just flashed, and I'm coming from very basic knowledge of things. My brain flashed to when you said like, it can be co-creating this while you're creating content. And right now, honestly, like in PowerPoint, if I'm, doing something and I've got the design side open in PowerPoint, it's pulling up slide design as I'm going through. So it's something I like the things, at least for me, when I'm going, okay, I'm familiar with some version of that. So, okay, it's easier for me to then mentally connect to what the potential is. So this idea of connection, co-creation, what else?
Scheduling, right? So the other thing you can do is, again, Claude, for instance, can connect to your Google Calendar, right? And so what if it is looking through that and it's helping you ahead of time prepare for meetings and things like that you've got coming up. So preparation. So my mind keeps going to something that I'm watching lately, in where people are using it to, while you sleep, so to speak, to do the research, create a post or create something for you, and then basically have it waiting for you to approve it if you want to, or it'll just automatically schedule it to go. To me, that second one is a little scary. Like, I don't want to wake up and read a post and be like, "Oh my God, what did I just post?"
Yeah.
What did Claude post on my behalf? No, thank you. So I like to, I would want to approve things, and also me personally, and I think you're this way. I like to, I like to create. I don't want to use AI to create for me, but I do like that it can go out and it can do the research for me. I love being able to have a handful of articles that I could look at And it is helpful that then it can go and it can aggregate those for me so that I have aggregate those or summarize those for you, or even kind of put them together so that you have a good understanding of a premise or something that I may want to create with. That works great for me. I'm seeing, and I think this is working for a lot of companies that are trying to, keep their brand up, and they've got to do a lot of social media posts, and they don't have a social media coordinator, and that is, their AI is going out there. It's grabbing the latest headlines or something or another, and is creating news articles or creating ideas and thoughts, and then just publishing them on a scheduled basis.
This is an interesting point in social media. Social media marketing is kind of an interesting example of this, only because I've got some experience of figuring this out, and this is what kind of started our conversation. Is that I've been doing some social media marketing and kind of wanting to learn the lay of the land, and I started to look at what I said is that I wanted to do my own stuff for a while and get really clear on what that voice is before I brought someone else in. There was a point where I looked at an agency and I thought, oh, you know what? They're going to do some stuff. I'm going to pull them in and start to leverage them to help me kind of get some momentum. And within an hour, the stuff that they were creating and posting, I was like, this feels like generic AI to me. And even when I was engaging with the customer service, oh, I'm engaging with a bot. And I thought, oh, why am I paying for this? Because I can figure this out. I'm paying for maybe a human who's really good at leveraging these things. And it's an interesting thing, because what you're describing is the ability, even this they're going to create it for me overnight. I like the idea of, it's the same thing I tell my brain at night, is if I've got a problem that I'm trying to solve, I'll say, like, I'm leaving it to my brain, try to dream about it in the morning, I expect an answer. And you're basically like, now you get to give it to an entity that actually has access to things. And it's like delegating to a team member to a certain extent. I think there's some level of, where is that nice bridge of human beings that are doing kind of some of this on your behalf and guiding it on some of your behalf, but also leveraging that technology. Because as you said, like, oh, I wouldn't want Claude to be posting something and then, what did you post for me? But that be no different than you delegated to a social media marketer, and the human posted something. Because I've had direct experience with that of like, no, I would not have posted this. This should have been vetted through me.
That's a great point. I suppose, and as we are talking about this, I was kind of thinking it really depends on what your objective is, right? The things that I'm posting as a thought leader. I'm posting as things that I'm thinking through and ways that I think we can influence change or uplift the world and of the work that I do, right? Not the world. I wish I could do it in the whole world, but yeah. Um, But I suppose, like, if I owned a rubber ducky company and I was trying to just get my brand out there, and I'm not good at marketing necessarily. I don't know a lot about marketing, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
But I do know that there's something about just the presence, the mere presence of being out there, of your brand being out there, and just being seen all the time. That becomes sort of, people, your toy becomes ubiquitous with whatever. And people want that. And so I think if I was trying to just create a brand, oh my God, I mean, I don't have time to just put branded rubber duckies out, you know, 2 times a day or what. I mean, and as opposed to the stuff that you and I are doing, that's deep thought posts, which might be a little different.
No, and you've just helped even in my head clarify something for me as I'm thinking about this, because there's some stuff that I'm putting out that, one, I'm saying it's coming from my thought process. I want that to be authentic. I want people to get, this is actually what I think, this is actually what I generated. There's other things that I put out. I'm just coming up with this label now that I call like comfort posts. Like, they're just little things. Like, I've been putting a post every Friday that's like some silly little video of like, hey, it's Friday, how do we have fun on Saturday type of thing. And I write a little something about that, because it's kind of representative of finding your joy and finding the fun and the lightness of stuff. I usually have a little video of like some little animal doing something. Anyways, That's a comfort post. And I could easily delegate that where AI might be able to generate some of those for me, or a little, quote that I might put out, or a tip that and to be able to pull from, hey, pull from my content this tip or something that I've already written so they can pull it. So once again, it's that I love that you're calling that out as like, what's your goal in this? And there's going to be times where things need to be authentic, and there's times where it can be generated from AI or pulled, where AI pulls it for you. It made me think of earlier, there was this debate that I was having with somebody around using AI generated photos of yourself, where it's they pulled, and it was basically, it's kind of like an airbrushed photo of yourself. And I was like, yeah, I don't mind. Sometimes in my content, I'm pulling from like Adobe Images, and they have where you can pick AI generated or you can exclude AI generated. Like, yeah, when there's things like I'm showing a picture of an elk or something, and they're going to put an elk on a, with sunglasses on looking at something. Okay, that's fine. That's clearly something that's not, true to form. But I had an issue with, and I think there's a lot of these out here where it's like, oh, if you can have AI can generate a version of you to do speak and do a lot of your social media marketing, or your profile picture now looks a little bit nicer. And I just sat there and I was like, yeah, there's certain things that I think need to be authentically you. And then there's times where having some AI version of you, maybe that's okay. For me, I don't want an AI generated version of me doing any of this kind of putting that out there. I want people to know they're getting the real version of me. But I don't, it's some version of, I've got friends who, when they post on Instagram, it's clearly filtered. I'm like, you're all in the same age group as me. You do not look that young. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not going to say that I've shied away from like a little Botox here and there. So there's almost like this gradation of authenticity that I think people have to learn how to navigate too, of based on what you're doing, when is it right time to have something that's generated on your behalf, and when is it the right time that it actually needs to be you? And I don't know if there's a black and white answer to that.
Yeah, there's probably not, but I will say some guidelines for me, anyways, are if it's something that I'm thinking about, if it's something that is interdisciplinary thinking, like connecting the dots, if it's something that's critical thinking, um, I can't have AI do that for me because I won't be able to speak to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if it's out there and if it's making connections that I haven't made, um, and I could just see, I've been in meetings where somebody says something and I'm like, oh, that's the first I ever heard of that. And I would hate to get caught in that conundrum.
Yeah.
So I think, from that perspective, that would be one of the things that, if it's something that I'm thinking about, if it's something that I'm going to apply, if it's something that me personally I need to know, lead or, perpetuate, then I would need to have a bigger hand in it, I guess.
Well, let me ask you that question then, because you said lead, and this is something that we haven't talked about, but you've sat in leadership roles. This is what you do. You lead teams, you sit in leadership roles, and from a workplace leadership perspective, because we've been kind of talking about this as an individual managing yourself. What about as a leader in an organization? I'll give an example. I just did a course around executive presence, and putting presentations together was part of it. And I was referencing, oh, here's some tools that you can use that are, AI you can leverage it. And the look in the group's face is like, yeah, we've already signed for the company that we're not allowed to use AI, a little bit like you're talking about. And I thought, I actually don't mind in this situation that you don't have access to AI, because I think you should learn the skills of what this is, so that when you are eventually leveraging AI, you can have the critical thinking of, is this the right content? Is what I want to use? But as a leader who's sitting in there and trying to make decisions, or either reinforcing a policy that the company's coming up with, like, how, as a leader, what do you recommend that let me rephrase this. As a leader, what is the ideal approach, or the approach that you would recommend if there weren't these constraints? The company's not telling you something. And then maybe if you can also bridge into if there are restraints, how would you recommend that they move and support their team?
If I can just reflect on something that you said a second ago, you said, I don't mind them not using it because they can learn how to do it. I'm paraphrasing, sorry, but the old way, basically, right? And then that way they can critically think. I don't know, and I'm just challenging this because I could be wrong here, Heather, but I'm just challenging the notion that one equals the other, that it's a logical flow, right? And the reason I'm challenging that is because do you have to learn the old way to do it, or do you have to learn a different way to do it? Like, are we putting people at a disadvantage if we're saying learn this first and then you'll be able to do this second?
Mm.
So to answer your question, as a leader, I think it's really important to give people the tools that they need in order to be as successful as possible. And personally, I think that may include AI. Really quickly, I was thinking, okay, this is an extreme, thing here, but recently, it's been in the news. Shopify and also to some extent Duolingo basically told their workforce that like you can't hire another person or a contractor without first telling me why AI can't do it.
Yeah.
Now that's a little bit extreme, but I understand it. Unfortunately, I'm not. No, I really understand. It's like it's not saying we're going to replace people with it, but it's saying that the work that you want to be done. So if you think about why do we hire a contractor, right? Contractors are hired in business to do a specific task or a specific thing, right? There's usually an end date to that. That's why they're a contractor. If there wasn't, we would just hire them as full time. So if you think about it from those perspectives, right? Like what tools are you giving the people that work for you? What tools are you giving them in order to complete the task? And how are you allowing them to do it creatively? And there's just so much more, especially with AI, that if we don't allow people to explore that, I think that we're putting them not at necessarily a business disadvantage, because I don't like that. I don't like that premise that or that notion like everybody's going to get ahead of you. Things are
Yeah.
changing so fast and so different. But I think that you're just putting people at a disadvantage in terms of being able to explore and be creative
Mm.
in the world that they know. And so that's something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of like learning and knowledge management, the world that I'm in, teach or train or support performance in the way that we've been doing it. But what disadvantage are we giving people who outside of their work lives have a different experience or different, they're using different things, right? This goes back to, a while ago, I heard people saying like, we got to figure out micro learning because everybody watches these YouTube videos, not Instagram or TikTok videos, right? And they scroll through them quickly and da 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 da. Perhaps I'm not saying that that's wrong, but what I am saying is that people, we've gone from a place where you pick up an encyclopedia and you have to go through a lot of stuff to
Mm.
get to the meat sometimes of what you're actually looking for, to a place where I don't even have to tap you, Heather, on the shoulder. I can just pull up ChatGPT, who now has a speak to text function, and and it'll speak back to you.
Well, you know what I like about what you're saying about this is it just hit me is there are times where I know I need to get my brain around the basics for me to make an intelligent decision about managing someone else doing it or hiring somebody to do it. Like there's times where I think it's useful. There's other times where I'd go, if I could just see it modeled or if I can just see the fast answer of it, then my brain can latch onto it, in a microsecond versus having to spend all this time. And I think what you're calling out is how are we supporting people in the way that they learn and the way that's going to unleash them in the best possible way, in the fastest way. And to your point that it's just kind of it can look different. It doesn't have to be just because it works for me doesn't mean that it works for them. That's a fair point.
And expectations are going to change, right? Like, so people who have access to TikTok and,
Yeah.
by the way, I watch a lot of like health, TikTok videos, and that's how I've suddenly learned. I fact check everything, by the way. Don't worry, I'm not putting weird things on my skin. But but that's how I'm getting a lot of ideas, anyways.
Oh,
In terms of my own health and things like that, is through these fast videos that I watch, right? That inspire a thought or a question and inspire my research through ChatGPT, which is, by the way, usually I keep saying ChatGPT, and I want to note that I'm using that as an overall term because I use various consumer LLM products for different things.
yeah.
But I quickly pull up my chat, LLM, and I'll ask it that question, like, is it really okay to do that, or really should I really be doing this, or how much sleep does a person really need, kind of a thing. And
But you earlier you brought up this thing about, the concept of before you hire anybody, could AI be doing this? And it made me flash on something because I've been a consultant and I've been internal and then a consultant. And I've been in situations where it's not AI, it's where, you said contractor, oh, we're not hiring vendors anymore. We're going to use internal talent. And I've been in situations where look, I wouldn't hire a vendor for a ton of these things because I can actually do it or my team can actually do it. And then there are times where we should be hiring a consultant. And I saw that there were people who were just hiring without intention.
yeah,
Or when budgets get slashed, well, now you've got to make a business case for why you're spending this money. And I see the pain that shows up of like, oh, they're cutting budgets. No, no, no. They're requiring you to be much more intentional about your budget, the way that you're spending money. So there's a difference, but I find sometimes people go, "Oh, they're not letting you hire people." Like, no, 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 they're asking you to be much more intentional around what you're doing. And I'm a big fan of, by all means, let's be intentional. Let's be thoughtful about the decisions that we're making. And I think AI is causing people to having because anytime you see this shift or change in capacity of what we can do, it whether that's a shrinking or a growing, there's a level of like, okay, we have to think about this and be intentional about how we're making our decisions. When it comes to I'm going to push here on just kind of you're leaning towards it when you talk about learning environment, but as a leader who's leading teams in these kind of changing environments, how do you create an environment that encourages people to take intelligent risk with things and start to, and not see themselves as like AI is the enemy or AI is the only source of information? This kind of lane that we're asking, the critical thinking, but the open to new and trying things. How do you create an environment that sets people up to feel safe to even do that and navigate their career where they feel supported? I think that's not an easy thing to do, is what I'm calling out.
yeah. I mean, I can answer that in a couple different ways. So first of all, in terms of like being creative and creating a safe environment to think outside of the box and be creative, I love these companies whose values are like fail fast, fail forward. I know this is like but I think it is important to support failure and to support the experimentation and what people do from a learning perspective. The second part of this, though, is in terms of like how do we create an environment where people could use tools like ChatGPT or other AI. And I think the number one thing is to create an environment of accountability, but from a good perspective, right? So like, I don't care how you get it done, but you're accountable for your final work product. And you're probably going to be able to get it done a lot faster using AI. So the expectation is probably going to change as business changes, but that's not necessarily what I'm putting on somebody in the beginning. But the accountability part of it is back to our earlier conversation about the lawyers who accidentally used poor case,
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
The accountability is get it done, get it done quickly, get it done efficiently, and ensure that the work product is solid.
yeah,
And then beyond that, like, do I care how you got it done? Um, Now, everybody that works in InfoSec right now is going, oh my God, though, you're creating an environment where people are bringing in, um, outside chat programs, things like that. But you asked me earlier, and you were saying companies that have a no AI policy. I think they are opening themselves up to a much bigger risk
yeah,
than having an AI policy. And talking about our students that we were talking about, when that person goes home, they have access. Not even when they go home, sitting on their phone in front of their computer, they have access to a consumer chat product. What is the danger that they are going to put something confidential or something proprietary from your organization into a personal chatbot because they're so afraid, of not using the tool? They want to use the tool to do, they want to get ahead. They want the competitive advantage, perceived or real, that is in their head by using the AI. So by creating a no AI policy, in my mind, is ludicrous and unsafe.
That's such a good point because in my head I kept going to like you're not going to stop them from like they've got a personal phone that they've got access, and I hadn't quite gotten to that idea of oh they will be putting your confidential information on this unsecure line. That's a really important call out, and I think it ties back to what you were saying is how how do you coach and train and create an environment of critical thinking and that skill set and within the ethical standards, like what are our ethical standards? And it really is about helping people to think versus this idea of I'm just going to from the outside control behavior, because they're not computers. Well, thank you, David, for taking the time and letting me pick your brain. I got selfishly a lot out of this that I'm going to use, and especially this idea of moving towards using AI as an operating system because my brain was not going there, and also helping leaders think about how do they create these environments. I'm going to be putting down your contact information in the video description. I'm assuming that if someone wants to chat with you about this and connect with you on it, that you're good with them reaching out on LinkedIn for you.
Absolutely. Lately, I've been specializing in AI literacy and really helping organizations navigate those challenges that come with all these rapid technological changes. So,
Well, and you also, I would encourage folks is look, like I said, the information will be down here for them to connect with you on LinkedIn, but also you've been doing a newsletter. What I like about it is you are staying connected on what are the things that are going on and kind of as things are shifting and changing. But what I like about the way that you've written your newsletter and the way that you tend to engage in it, as I think people can see in this interview, is extremely relatable, regardless of what level of exposure, experience, comfort level that people have with technology, because you come from this learning world. So I encourage everybody sign up for the newsletter. Check out Dave on LinkedIn and connect with him if you want to be smarter. That's what I use him for. All right. Thank you, David, and thank you everybody for joining another episode. Hope to see you at the next one. Take care.
thanks, Evan.